Hello everyone, and welcome to the second part of the Custom Object Creator development video. In this video I'm going to show you the progress on the custom object creators, which will be released to the public next Monday. More specifically, we will have a look at custom modular objects and a variety of other objects which players can create soon. Just like for the other object types, everything begins by importing a model. The file I imported contains two models, the actual wall, and in Blender I always have a cube to help with scaling the object. Depending on the object type, you can import multiple models and each role can be selected in this panel, which will show you if the selection is invalid. In this case, I only need the actual wall object, so I can select it as the main object and the cube will be selected as don't import, so it will be ignored. Then I can confirm the selection and start editing the object. Again, just like for all objects, we have the three basic information name, description and error, which are required to display the object in placement lists. Now, as you probably know, modular building parts can snap to each other to create complete buildings. And you can create every single one of these parts in this editor. Simply select the type right here and it will preview the size of the modular part. This size is only relevant to make the snapping work, which means that in this case other walls will be attached here, here, here and here. But if you want, the size can be exceeded. For instance, you could create a special modular part like a fishing pier that can be placed and attached like a foundation. Back to the modular wall, I can select a collider for physical collisions with things like projectiles. This also shows one of the improvements since the custom equipment updates. Cuboid colliders are now sized automatically based on the dimensions of the object. The next option is only relevant if you create transparent objects like glass walls. In that case, you can toggle for each collider if the AI will see through it or not. However, you should only have see-through colliders if the object can also be destroyed. Otherwise, units could get stuck. The impact effect determines which sounds and particle effects will be played when collisions happen with this object. To interact with AI units, there are two sections and depending on the modular type, the object can block AI units or provide surfaces where units can walk on. Here we can see another improvement. Some errors and warnings will be displayed directly in the settings without having to validate the item. And the settings which cause the errors are also explicitly named and highlighted now. For this modular type, the AI obstacle is required, and by default the physics collider will be used for these calculations. However, for slim objects, a custom collider should be selected to ensure correct calculations. The minimum size can be displayed by hovering this info. Since walls can't have AI surfaces, let's switch to a different modular type, foundations. To allow units and other objects to be placed on the object in the battle editor, placement colliders have to be set up. The new polygon collider can be used to quickly define surfaces by selecting 3 or 4 points. The points will snap to the vertices of the mesh to create accurate surfaces, but that can also be deactivated. Once the placement colliders are set up, the navigation data can be generated. This data defines nodes which will be used for pathfinding calculations during battles. Most of the data can be generated automatically. I recommend an offset setting of 0.5 for objects that are perfectly centered, but depending on the object you can play around with it to shift the nodes a bit. But you want a grid that somewhat looks like this, with some space from the edges of the object to prevent units from walking in the air. If for some reason you are not happy with the result, you can always add, move and delete nodes manually. The last thing to do is selecting edge nodes. These nodes can connect to all other nodes on the terrain or other objects to connect them. The last section is for destruction data. Most of the vanilla modular parts can be destroyed, so it's recommended to set up destruction data for your custom modular objects as well. The destruction can always be deactivated for each individual modular part in the battle editor. In addition to health points, you can select armor values for objects as well, but I wouldn't recommend it because none of the vanilla objects use armor. There are 3 different destruction modes. Delete object will literally just delete the object when the health points drop below 0. Generate parts can be used to generate destruction parts right here in the editor, which will then be spawned similar to when vanilla objects are being destroyed. And imported parts work pretty much the same, but you can select the parts when importing a file with multiple models in it. That is useful for more complex objects where you have to create the destroyed parts manually. The category named object can be used for a variety of different object types. You can create small decorative objects, complex objects like towers, or objects with features like lights, text, and mines. In this case, we have an additional base setting to set the object filter. The main ref is read-only and selected when importing a file with multiple objects. Then there are placement settings which determine how the placement will work. There are 2 main placement modes. Let's start with the regular one, which is used for objects which can be placed on top of the terrain or other objects. There are 3 different layers for this placement mode: the terrain, objects like foundations, and then small objects like tables. And you can select for each layer if the object can be placed on it or not. The Align to Ground option can be used to align the object to the surface angle of the terrain. And the placement angle can be limited to prevent object placement that wouldn't make sense. The other placement mode is Surface, which is used to attach the object to the surface of other objects, similar to how alarm objects, buttons, text nodes, and a bunch of other objects are placed. The alignment axis determines on which axis the object will be aligned on. Another improvement is that some options can be hovered over to display or preview additional information. Depending on the selected placement settings, more or less options are available for the object. Next up is the Detail Placement Collider, which is optional. This collider should be set for items like tables or containers if you only want small detail objects and equipment items to be placed onto it. The collision, AI obstacle, AI surface, and destruction settings are the same like for modular objects, so I won't repeat them here. Just know that depending on the other settings, some of them might not be available. And for detail objects, I would recommend to keep the destruction setting deactivated for better performance. The last section for this object type contains various features that can be enabled to quickly add functionality. For instance, the ammo crate feature adds bullets to the player while in the radius of the object based on the tick rate and size. And the content can be selected here. The heal crate works similar but heals the player based on the heal per second setting. Optionally, the capacity can be limited. The light effect feature can be used to add a point or spotlight source, and the particle effect feature to display a custom particle system. And both features can be controlled with scripting. Text objects have various settings to adjust how the text is displayed, and the text can be edited similar to signs in the battle editor and changed with scripting. The scripting integration can be used to interact with this object. While looking at the object, the interaction key can be pressed, which will trigger a scripting event. In addition to that, you can use scripting to change the interaction text or deactivate the interaction. The settings of the trap feature are similar to the custom grenade settings. You can select preset or custom particle and sound effects that will be played when the trap is triggered, and various damage effects. With the damage area, you can define a trigger area in which units receive regular, poison, or flame damage. This can be used to create objects like this poison stain. And the last feature allows you to create container items like safes, cabinets, or crates. You can select an object as a door and create an animation with a rotation or position offset. A custom sound for opening and closing the container can be selected, and when a detail placement collider is set up and equipment items are placed on it, they can't be picked up unless the door is open. Background objects only have the base settings for the placement lists. There are no collisions or any other functionality. These objects can be placed on the terrain or right next to the terrain, and the height will be adjusted based on the height of the terrain next to it. These background objects can be used to create a variety of large-scale details like skylines in the background. As I mentioned, all the features of the objects like lights, particle effects and containers can be referenced and controlled with visual scripting. In addition, objects which don't block units or provide AI services can be spawned and moved with scripting. One last improvement I wanted to show you is a new color tool. In the unit creator, you used to be able to favorite colors, which were then unorganized for quick access. Now, for each color picker in game, you can load and save colors, which can be named or organized into categories and ordered by name, color or date. So yeah, that's all I wanted to show in this video, and I really hope you like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.